I'm not 100% consistent, or maybe I should rephrase that. I try to be consistent because these things I actually do think are so I do what I think. But like, I happen to like recordings that have dynamics in a lot of ways, not just, I'm not talking about compressing and mastering and stuff, but I'm talking about dynamics like dissonance and consonance, the same way you would hear in a Bach piece, except on a larger scale, like in a mixing. So I actually like some parts to sound bad. Why? Because then when it transitions into the part that sounds good, it's got this like flower opening up kind of thing where it's like you're coming out of the water into the air. You know what I mean? And it's good. Just like fiction books have villains. I find it really cool when you have like badly EQ'd moments intentionally, because it's an intro and it's gonna just bam go into this part where it's EQ'd wonderfully and you hear everything crisp and clear. And I like the transition. And to me, it's kind of a dynamics with regard to timbre, or with volume and everything else. I like transitions. I like stuff that happens. Just like I like chords that change. I like rhythms that I like modal modulation. So I like metric modulation. I like superimposing different meters on top of each other. And so I'm getting into things like, I would really want to do is I want to get good at writing polyphonically, which is so new to me. Within the last year, I've been kind of working on it. And then what I'd like to do is take that polyphonic writing into polytonal, where basically I'd like to pivot two different key signatures against each other. And I've kind of balanced, I kind of went through the chords, just like with a C chord and a D chord. And you see the D minor, rather, is all scale tones to the C, which is the major. If you took that as like the father chord, and this was like the kid chord, that'd be all the scale tones and how they fit together. Like, if I were going to assign it a number to how dissonant it is, well, a number by what standard? It's like, well, by all the chords within that key. We're just looking at within a key. So like your E minor and the C is very consonant because the root becomes a third, the third becomes a fifth, and the fifth becomes a major seventh. So a C major with an E minor triad just becomes a C major 7 chord when you're looking at it from the point of view of the C major, which would probably have more to do with which chord is on top and which chord's on bottom. There was an example where you don't want to play second inversions in like the Baroque rules, but there was a context of when you could do it, and I think it was when the second inversion wasn't really second inversion because there was a lower voice. But that's when the interval was okay, that you think of between the fifth and the root. That was okay to have that interval so long as the fifth wasn't the actual lowest note. Actually, you know what? That right there, if I added this note, which is it made an E minor 7 chord, that is the first chord on my first song on my first album. And I thought it was an E minor chord. Like, I got my E minor triad, but with a sixth. And I remember it was Alex. I think it was Alex Makachek. It could have been Scott Henderson. I think it was Alex Makachek who told me, well, that's going to be heard as a C major chord, first inversion. Meaning it is kind of those two chords superimposed in a way. But how does the 4 chord sound against it? And what I found was that the 3 chord sounded the most consonant, the 5th chord sounded the next most consonant, the 7th sounded pretty dissonant, and it just got more dissonant as you stack the thirds. Kind of like how you stack thirds in notes, you stack thirds in chords. And so it's kind of an interesting idea. If you write a line in C major and then you write a line in E minor, Phrygian, you find that really you're just harmonizing in a very normal way. So I don't know, there's some experimentation I want to do on that, which might stretch the ear a little bit. It might sound a little bit far out. But anyway, that's just a problem I want to solve, like a riddle. I want to try to figure it out. But anyway, man, certainly talked. Yeah, it's sort of like it's thinking about music, actually thinking about music. And most people, what they're doing is they're thinking about a girl they broke up with or something, or the car they drive or whatever, which is fine if it's wholesome. I prefer it to be wholesome, but it's nice. That's what I'm really digging about Bach, and I'm digging about that kind of music. Is like, like there's songs called a fugue in such and such key. It's not called, uh, you know, softly as in a morning sunrise. You know, what does that have to do with music? That sounds like a scene from a movie or something. Music is about notes and harmony and rhythms and whatnot, and that's kind of something that kind of happened, throughout time. But you'd hear songs. This is called a prelude. You know what I mean? And I've wrote 24 of them. Here you go. They all have the same name, except they're in different keys because they don't have names really. They are what they are. They're called what they are. But so yeah, I kind of appreciate music that's about music, and a lot of Bach stuff was not quite like that. The cantata is like that in the sense that it's cantata, but the cantatas all have names and stuff, and the pieces within the cantata have names that relate to what the song's about. The songs be about something, biblical or whatever, and they're great. But that's the kind of stuff that you might want to think about. That's the kind of stuff that you don't know. The tricks, like I'm going to write a progression, and here's going to be my cadence, and at the end of the cadence, I'm going to trick them. I'm not really going to go to the one chord. I'm going to go to this other chord, and then I'm going to have 3 more chords go by before I get to the actual cadence, so that the end of the song sound like, hey, here comes the end, folks. Oh, not quite, and yada, 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 now the end. And what that's going to be like, people are going to be listening and be like, oh, whoa. It'll kind of like, it rejuvenates the experience a little bit. You could do it in a pop song. You could take any rock song add one of those like deceptive cadences to the very end, and wrap it up in a couple more measures, So what I'm saying is like, you could take music like punk rock, and I don't say it's invalid exactly. There's subject and there's style. The subject could be positive in a lot of different ways. Like, if you had wrote a song that was a punk song called "God Save the Queen" or whatever, and it was against the idea of monarchy, which hopefully would maybe be about. I'm not speaking of the song exactly, the one that the Sex Pistols did, but like, if you did something like that, and your lyrics amounted to the fact of like pro-freedom and individualism not being the subjects or serfs of some supposedly celestially chosen entity to rule over you, and then if you're satirizing that, then I think you have very positive content. And if your chords and your music goes, whatever, which is like Blitzkrieg Bob or something. It's a totally different example. But the point is, like, if you had like that going on, you're writing a good song. It doesn't have to be classical music. It doesn't have to be musically that fantastic in that way to be artistically valid. But then it kind of comes down to preferences and philosophy and stuff like that. And what I would do with that kind of scenario is I would like to play a game. And I can't do it for you live here because I haven't figured it out yet. But it's like there's got to be something to solve. And the game would be, okay, I'm going to take that style of punk music. And then I think, okay, now how could I make that good? And what I actually mean by good is like new, fresh. What's the point of me doing it? Well, the point of me doing it is that not doing what somebody else did creates something worth hearing. I mean, if you listen to the Ramones or you listen to Sex Pistols, I'd say it's worth hearing. If you listen to me try to be the Ramones and Sex Pistols, it's not worth hearing. Go listen to them. You know what I mean? So what I would do is, and this actually sounds like a good idea for an album. Now I'm inspired to do it. Come up with stupid, like that'd be the way I'd think about it. Maybe I don't know, okay, ooh, judgmental, calling it stupid. But yeah, in my mind, here's what I'm going to call it stupid in my mind. I'm going to come up with stupid ass riffs like that. Okay, I got a stupid riff. And now that I have a stupid riff, what is something that is out of character from this stupid riff? Like, how do I take that essence and make it interesting? And I could think, well, what's my drum beat doing over it, for example? This is the way I thought for a long time, because rhythm was so untapped. People didn't have the guts or whatever, I don't know, to try different things outside of fusion. So, and there wasn't a lot of that rhythmic stuff going on back in the Bach day. What would Bach do? What would, Chopin do if he was a drummer and that kind of thing? And then we've got people these days, kind of like Marco Miniman and Terry Bozzio and Thomas Lang and Virgil Donati, Morgan Ogren, whoever else, But those are the guys that come to my mind right away. So my favorite drummers. And if you listen to punk music, you're going jaku 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 jak braku jaku jaku jak jaku 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 jak jaku jaku, something like that. Snare kick, snare kick, snare kick. Or it'd be open hi-hat. And underneath you had like kick drum, kick drum, kick drum, kick drum, kick drum. You hear that, So what if instead you hear like so you're hearing this like and it it's kind of like a shuffle. Yeah, it is kind of in a way, but I mean that'd be the fun. I mean, it's like, yeah, it's right. Yeah, exactly. So then I start to think like that. Maybe I can do that, and maybe I can do something else. Like if I have this going. Maybe then that'll be on that'll be one ear, and then a second guitar will come in, maybe, And if I've got this going, then maybe I can have a second guitar playing the 3 chord. Now this is going to be kind of harsh, probably. What you're going to have is a major 7 chord, because you're going to have that, and this time the second guitar will come in being like, and you're going to have this essentially. And now what happens is, you go, okay, well this still sounds kind of bad to me, but it's starting to sound like something I didn't predict. And then you hunt around and you just keep hunting different grooves, different chords. You have basically it's like this. You don't want to be blind as a rule and just be hunting around in the dark. But with the exception of where you're attempting to do something different, which means something that others haven't done, you haven't heard it before, and you only have the kind of the nucleus of that in mind, because it hasn't really existed yet. You're going to make it exist. And so there's an element of hunting, but it's not blind in that way. It's kind of directed. You're trying to do something original. You have these various concepts, some things maybe that haven't been put together before. You're trying to merge certain ideas that are different worlds, like bringing 2 different cultures together, and different techniques. This one guy came up with this technique over here, and there's this trend over there. Maybe you can take the trend and add the technique and have something original. And that's, to me, kind of the point. You got this creative thing going on. And there's probably a lot of ways you could do it. And any way you can do it is probably valid, as so long as you create something fresh. And that's kind of the big deal. Obviously, you want to enjoy doing it. If it's new and original, I feel like it kind of has the right to exist, in a stylistic sense. In the sense of theme or subject, I don't want to create anything more that is like, I'll write sad songs, sure, because I think, like, as I said before, there's a time to be sad. And so if you write a sad song about a truly sad subject, it's valid in a way. If you, but if it's, you know what I mean, if it's that kind of irrational, almost like pity gluttony or whatever, it's like, or some of the, like rap songs, obviously a lot of examples of bad stuff in a way where it's like, that's the difference between subject and style. You can take the sound of their music, like the bass, the synthesizers, whatever it may be, and that's style that doesn't have subject to it. There's some implicit subject, like I mentioned before about the fact that it's so monotonous, and kind of abrasive, kind of like with metal. Metal's abrasive too. Maybe not quite as monotonous. Definitely as monotonous on the whole. I guess in terms of timbre, but there's still more going on within a single piece than there is with rap. But you know what I mean? So I wouldn't call it a perfect music exactly, in my view, but that's according to the subject and everything. Some people might say it's not perfect because it isn't vulgar enough, you know. And maybe there's probably even a time to be vulgar. There's probably just like there's a time to be angry or a time to be sad. I suppose if maybe like, I don't know if this is a good example, but who's that old comedian who got a lawsuit for saying the S word or something? Way back in the day. I don't remember if it was the S word either, but maybe it was the F word. I don't know. But he got in trouble for obscenity, which, is kind of a. I mean, if you're fighting censorship, then you probably have to be vulgar. That's probably the point then. But once you're allowed to be vulgar, then you can kind of hopefully use discretion, or you can boycott it in terms of what you listen to or like. But in terms of art, it kind of comes down to what resonates with you. And what I find these days, the music that resonates with me most is Bach, probably. With the exception of all the stuff that I've ever loved. I've carried that with me. I still love Paul Gilbert. I was listening to Tom Waits the other day. I showed some Tom Waits to somebody who never heard it, just eating it up. I love Tom Waits. So I never stopped loving all the stuff I loved in the past, like Meshuggah, Devin Townsend. I don't listen to as much metal these days, but my point is, like, the thing that I feel is most, the direction I'd like to go in has more in common with Bach than it has with I don't know, anything else. But then once you think of a cool idea, like, I don't know, that I do want to do a blues album with my friend, partly just because I've never done one, partly because my friend is into it and I'd like to do an album with him. Um, I've done a funk album, stuff like that. I have pre-productions of jazz stuff, more traditional.